Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere older than old. Past pyramids, past marble ruins, past even the first bedtime story your ancestors might have mumbled beside a flickering fire. We're heading to the land between two rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, a stretch of sun-baked mud that somehow birthed writing, math, taxes, and, unfortunately, paperwork. You probably won't survive this, mainly because you'd need to live about 6,000 years to see how it all unfolded. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're listening somewhere far away, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where in the world you're tuning in from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing beside a river that gleams bronze under the fading sun. The air smells faintly of wet clay, reeds, and something smoky. Wood fires from huts nearby, maybe, or the scent of bitmunin used to seal the boats that glide slowly by. You're in Mesopotamia, around 5,000 years ago, where the first real cities are just beginning to hum awake. People here don't yet call it civilization, they just call it home. You step into the shallows, sandals sinking into soft silt that has traveled from mountains hundreds of miles away. Every spring, the rivers flood, spilling their muddy treasure across the land. That's what makes this place work. Without the floods, there'd be nothing. No barley fields, no canals, no baked bread at sunrise. Historians still argue whether it was the floods that forced humans to organize or whether people organized first and then learned to tame the rivers. Either way, you're standing in the muddy cradle where it all started. Ahead, you spot clusters of huts, mud brick walls smoothed by hand, roofs thatched with reeds. People move slowly in the heavy evening heat, finishing the day's chores. Someone is grinding grain with a stone that looks far too heavy to lift. Another person is patching a fishing net, humming a tune that sounds like wind through dry grass. It's simple, but it's bustling. Civilization in its baby steps. As you wander farther inland, the land rises gently. The village paths are just hardened mud, but they've been walked enough times to leave grooves where the carts roll. Children chase each other through the dust, their laughter echoing between clay walls. Dogs bark lazily. Somewhere, someone argues about grain rations. You can't understand their words, but you can hear the tone. Some things never change. The Tigris whispers behind you, and in that sound lies everything this land depends on. Mesopotamia will someday be a Greek word meaning between rivers, but for the people here, it's not geography. It's survival. The rivers are both generous and cruel. Some years they flood too high, washing away crops and homes. Other years they shrink, leaving cracked earth and thirsty fields. It's a game of balance, and everyone plays. You pass a man carving a strange wedge-shaped mark into a lump of clay. He presses a reed stylus into it, tap, 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 then smooths another patch and starts again. You realize you're watching the invention of writing. These marks, called cuneiform, are just records for now, lists of goods, deaths, or offerings to the gods. But in time, they'll carry stories, laws, and love poems. It's like stumbling into the moment humanity decided to start leaving receipts for itself. A warm breeze carries the smell of brewing beer. Yes, they've got that figured out too. Fermented barley bubbling in clay jars, thick, yeasty, and a little gritty, but it does the job. Archaeologists found that workers were often paid in beer rations, which might explain why productivity was surprisingly high for people using stone tools. One quirky detail, they drank through long straws made of reeds to filter out the sediment. Imagine sipping your salary through a straw every evening. Civilization had its perks. You make your way toward the sound of low chanting. Near a raised mound, a small crowd has gathered around a priest. His robe is dust-colored, his beard neatly curled with oil. He's making offerings to Enki, the god of wisdom and fresh water. There's a bowl of grain, a small jug of beer, and a carved fish symbol. Simple tokens to keep the floods kind and the harvest steady. The priest murmurs words that ripple through the crowd like wind over water. Historians still argue whether these early temples were purely religious or also served as the first government offices. You suspect both. Someone has to keep track of who gave what offering, who owes what grain, who borrowed whose ox. The gods, it turns out, are excellent excuses for developing spreadsheets. You pause to watch the last light of day stretch over the flat plain. It's almost meditative, the way everything slows. Somewhere beyond the horizon, more villages are doing the same, lighting fires, feeding livestock, waiting for the cool night to arrive. The stars begin to flicker to life, faint at first, then dazzling against the deepening indigo sky. You can see why people here began to map them, marking their positions, tying myths to their patterns. The constellations might be the first bedtime stories ever told, whispered by farmers and fishermen staring up from riverbanks just like this one. A child tugs your sleeve, holding up a small clay figurine. It's a woman with wide hips and round eyes. Fertility, most likely, though no one's written the manual yet. The child grins proudly, as if showing you a masterpiece. You smile back, wondering how many like this have crumbled into dust over millennia, only to be dug up by future hands. Every artifact, you realize, is just someone's Tuesday project that refused to die. You wander a bit farther until the village fades behind you. The river hums softly, reflecting a crescent moon that seems impossibly bright. Somewhere, a dog barks again, closer this time, and the air cools just enough to raise goosebumps on your arms. You take a deep breath. It smells of water and clay and eternity. People here don't know they're building history. They don't know that future generations will name this region the cradle of civilization. To them, it's just life. Planting, digging, worshiping, hoping the floods don't come too soon. But you can feel something stirring beneath the soil. The weight of beginnings, the quiet hum of invention. Cities will rise here. Uruk, Lagash, each leaving footprints that stretch across time. You turn back toward the faint glow of firelight behind you. The sounds of laughter and the murmur of voices drift through the dark. The first city lights in human history. Tiny, flickering, and powered by faith, hunger, and curiosity. The river sighs again, as if settling in for the night. Somewhere under its slow current, reeds brush against ancient stones that once bordered irrigation canals. Those stones might still be there, buried deep beneath modern soil, holding on to the memory of the first people who dared to shape water and clay into civilization. As the night settles over Mesopotamia, you feel an odd calm, like the earth itself is whispering, "Remember this." The stars blink patiently overhead, and you realize they've been watching this same story unfold for thousands of years, one flood and one harvest at a time. You wake, or rather drift, into the next morning, where the sun climbs quickly over the plains. The light has a baked gold quality, already hot enough to shimmer over the river's edge. Ahead of you lies Uruk, the world's first true city. You can almost feel its pulse before you see it. There's movement in every direction. Donkeys loaded with baskets, men hauling clay bricks, children darting between stalls, and above it all, the steady thump of hammers and voices echoing off stone. Uruk isn't just a city. It's humanity's first attempt at saying, "We're permanent." You trudge toward its walls, which rise like sun-bleached cliffs from the plain. Made of millions of baked mud bricks, each one hand-pressed and dried in the relentless sun. They stretch farther than your eyes can follow, enclosing markets, temples, workshops, and what might just be the world's first case of urban traffic congestion. Historians still argue whether Uruk's population peaked at 40,000 or closer to 80,000 souls, But either way, it's the New York of 3200 BCE, minus the bagels and rent control. You enter through a gate decorated with reliefs of lions and bulls. The detail is astonishing. Muscles carved with pride, eyes fierce yet weary, as if even the animals are tired of the heat. The road beneath your feet is hard-packed clay, worn smooth by countless sandals. The city smells like humanity distilled. Smoke, grain, sweat, and sweet beer wafting from open courtyards. Somewhere nearby, you hear singing, low, rhythmic, hypnotic. It's the sound of temple workers chanting hymns to Inanna, goddess of love, war, and probably office drama. Her temple, the Iana complex, towers ahead, its whitewashed walls catching the morning light. You wander toward it, drawn by curiosity and the faint hope of shade. Inside the temple courtyard, everything is organized with bureaucratic precision. You expected mysticism, you find paperwork. Clay tablets line the benches, each marked with wedge-shaped signs. Lists of sheep, jars of oil, quantities of grain, and maybe, if someone was feeling poetic, a small note about divine favor. This is where writing flourished. What started as simple accounting turned into storytelling, poetry, and law. You're standing in the birthplace of the written word, and the irony is that it began with taxes. A young scribe squints at you suspiciously. His stylus moves fast, his hand steady. He's recording rations for the temple workers, grain, oil, and that beloved beer again. You watch as he carefully presses symbols into wet clay. Each mark has meaning, a record, a memory, a claim against forgetting. When he finishes, he sets the tablet aside to dry in the sun. In that moment, you realize that humanity just invented immortality, not for bodies, but for thoughts. You wander deeper into the city, where life feels strangely modern. Market stalls line the streets, shaded by woven mats. Merchants shout offers in voices rough from dust. One man sells copper tools. Another trades bright lapis beads imported from faraway Afghanistan. There are baked fish sizzling over coals, baskets of dates glistening like amber, and pots of honey that catch every stray sunbeam. Someone is even roasting chickpeas, which proves that good snacks have always been a human priority. Uruk hums with energy, yet beneath the noise is something steadier, a rhythm of routine. You watch potters shaping jars, their hands spearing clay into smooth spirals. You hear women grinding flour, chatting about who's late to temple duty. You catch sight of farmers unloading bundles of reeds for construction, their backs slick with sweat. Every movement feels ancient and familiar at once. Civilization, it seems, isn't a sudden miracle. It's just people doing ordinary things together for a very long time. You pause at a mural depicting a man with an elaborate beard and a tall, conical crown. His name, you're told, is Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, part hero, part myth, all legend. Historians still argue whether he was real or just the world's first celebrity influencer, but his stories will echo for millennia. Somewhere, a storyteller is already reciting his epic in rhythmic tones, his voice rising and falling like the river itself. You catch fragments: friendship, loss, immortality. Heavy themes for a city still figuring out indoor plumbing. The storyteller's audience sits cross-legged in the dust, sipping beer from shared jars through long straws. Every so often, someone laughs, someone sighs, someone wipes sweat from their brow. It's hard to say whether they come for wisdom or just for shade, but either way, it's mesmerizing. The story, the sound, the shared stillness. It's easy to imagine that storytelling here isn't just entertainment, it's therapy. You wander on, tracing your fingers along the rough walls. The texture is surprisingly warm, the baked clay almost humming with stored sunlight. A few cracks reveal the straw that binds it all together. These walls have seen centuries already, rebuilt, repaired, expanded. The city breathes like a living thing, inhaling floods, exhaling empires. Somewhere under your feet are older layers, previous versions of Uruk, stacked like sediment, each generation building on the bones of the last. Archaeologists later will call this the Uruk expansion, when the city's influence spread across Mesopotamia through trade, culture, and the irresistible allure of bureaucracy. As you step into a quieter side street, a woman leans out from a doorway, fanning herself with a palm leaf. She offers a small clay cup, water, cool and clean. You take a sip, grateful. It tastes faintly of minerals and dust, but it's life. She smiles, points at your sandals, and laughs. They're caked in mud from the river. You laugh too. Civilization may have invented writing, but it hasn't yet discovered good laundry detergent. The street curves toward a wide plaza, where workers haul massive stones toward a temple foundation. They grunt in unison, ropes straining, muscles quivering under the sun. A foreman shouts orders. There's no machinery, just teamwork and stubbornness. One quirky detail archaeologists found: sometimes these workers etched small jokes or doodles into the underside of bricks. Tiny, hidden graffiti from people who never imagined future generations would find their humor still baked into the walls. At the plaza's edge, you spot a tall wooden pole topped with a gleaming copper disc. It flashes in the sunlight like a signal. The Eye of Inanna, someone whispers beside you. It's a sacred symbol, part religious beacon, part civic emblem. Some scholars think these early cities used such symbols to mark themselves from afar, like ancient billboards. You picture rival travelers trudging across the plain, seeing that shimmer and thinking, "Ah, yes, Uruk, the city with all the paperwork." By midday, the heat thickens until even the air feels heavy. You find shade near a canal where water flows lazily through stone sluices. Ducks paddle past. A group of boys jumps in, laughing. They splash and shove, unconcerned that this canal is the literal lifeline of the city. Every drop here is planned, measured, redirected. The Sumerians were master engineers long before Rome dreamed of aqueducts. Still, historians debate how centralized it all was, whether the city's irrigation was managed by kings or by community councils. Either way, it works. The fields beyond the city bloom green against the desert. You rest for a moment, leaning back on your elbows, the murmur of water soothing your ears. Somewhere nearby, a flute plays, a slow, repetitive melody that drifts like the river breeze. The sound wraps around you, hypnotic and warm. For a second, you forget that this is all thousands of years in the past. It feels like any summer afternoon in any bustling city. Noise, laughter, small talk, heat, and life. As the sun begins to slide down the sky, Uruk glows in golds and reds. Shadows lengthen along the walls. Torches are lit, fires spark in clay ovens, and the hum of the city softens into something calmer. From somewhere high in the temple, a priest's voice chants the evening hymn, slow and rhythmic, carried by the wind across the rooftops. You can almost believe the city itself is humming along, a lullaby of bricks and breath. You climb a small hill to look back. From here, Uruk sprawls like a tapestry, streets winding, smoke curling, the ziggurat writhing at its heart like a promise to the sky. The river glints beyond it, reflecting the last streaks of daylight. The world feels enormous, yet entirely centered on this one glowing city that dared to call itself civilization. As night settles, you take one last deep breath, the scent of clay, smoke, and faint sweetness of fermenting grain. You realize something quietly profound. Writing, architecture, art, law, these weren't inventions born of genius, but of necessity, community, and the simple need to remember who we are. And so, beneath the vast Mesopotamian sky, Uruk hums softly in the dark, a city that rode itself awake, and has never really fallen asleep since. Morning comes to Mesopotamia with that familiar shimmering heat, the kind that blurs the horizon until even the nearest palm tree looks like a mirage. You follow the lazy sweep of the Euphrates south, where the land flattens into wide plains dotted with date groves and dusty canals. The air smells faintly of salt and mud, and your sandals crunch over dried river clay that cracks like old pottery beneath your feet. Ahead, something rises from the plain, tall and geometric, shimmering pale gold in the sunlight. It's the Great Ziggurat of Ur, one of the most awe-inspiring monuments ever made by hands still learning how to make bricks that last forever. Ur feels quieter than Uruk. The crowds are smaller, the streets broader, the pace slower, as if the city itself has taken a deep breath. You pass the outer walls, their bricks marked with the stamp of King Ur-Nammu, the builder who turned piles of clay into a divine staircase. You can still see his seal impressed into countless bricks, a tiny mark declaring, "I was here," over and over again. Humanity's oldest graffiti, baked into eternity. You step into the city as the sun climbs higher. The air wavers above the rooftops, and every corner seems alive with the hum of daily life. Merchants call out softly from shaded awnings, offering copper bangles, baskets of dates, jugs of sweet beer. Women in long linen dresses carry jars balanced on their heads, their footsteps sure and rhythmic. A small boy guides a goat through the crowd, muttering something that sounds suspiciously like an insult. Civilization might be ancient, but sarcasm apparently came pre-installed. At the city's heart, the ziggurat towers over everything. It's impossible not to feel small beneath it. The structure climbs skyward in 3 great terraces, each one layered with steps that narrow toward the top. It gleams faintly in the light, its bricks washed in gypsum and decorated with streaks of blue glaze. This is no ordinary building. It's a cosmic ladder, connecting earth to heaven, mortal to divine. You begin to climb the wide central staircase. Each step is deep and deliberate, meant to slow your pace and focus your breath. The bricks radiate warmth beneath your feet, still holding the memory of the morning sun. Around you, the hum of the city fades. You can hear wind whistling faintly against the edges of the structure. The higher you climb, the more the air feels alive with quiet reverence. Halfway up, you pause to look down. From here, Ur unfolds like a map. Orderly streets, courtyards, and small temples, each built from the same golden brown clay. Beyond the walls, canals branch out like veins, feeding life into the pale distance. It's easy to see why this place mattered so much. The moon god Nana, the city's patron deity, was believed to live right here at the top of this structure. His silver light ruled the night, guiding the rhythms of planting and harvest, the tides, and time itself. At the summit, you find the temple, a rectangular chamber of cool stone and shadow. Inside, a faint scent of incense lingers, something woody and ancient, like cedar or frankincense. A priest stands near an altar, his robe the color of sand, his beard oiled and precise. He doesn't seem surprised to see you, just nods slightly, as if visitors from the future are part of his daily schedule. On the altar sits a small silver crescent, symbol of Nana. He gestures for you to sit, so you do. Outside, the desert wind sighs softly. He begins to chant in Sumerian, words that rise and fall like waves. You don't understand them, but the rhythm is soothing, half prayer, half lullaby. He offers a libation, pouring a little water onto the ground. It hisses faintly as it touches the sun-baked brick. The sound is almost tender, like a whispered conversation between elements. Historians still argue whether these ziggurats were places of actual worship or simply platforms for the gods' houses, grand symbols meant to remind everyone who's boss. Either way, standing here, you can't help but feel that blend of awe and insignificance that great architecture always stirs. The temple's silence seems to hum with meaning, even if the words have long been lost. You lean against the parapet, gazing out across the plain. The landscape looks eternal, flat, shimmering, quiet, but you know it's deceptive. The Euphrates has shifted courses countless times, abandoning cities, drowning others. Somewhere beneath that calm surface lies chaos in slow motion. Urt itself will one day fall to sand and silence, its people scattered, its canals choked with silt. But for now, it thrives. For now, the moon god still smiles down from above, and the night is his kingdom. Descending the ziggurat, you pass a group of pilgrims climbing in solemn rhythm, their arms full of offerings, barley, small clay idols, and even a bundle of reeds tied with red thread. One woman carries a newborn, her eyes lifted skyward. She murmurs a prayer as she climbs, a plea for health, perhaps, or luck, or simply sleep. You can almost feel the devotion radiating from her, fragile yet fierce. Back on the ground, you find the city's residential quarters. The streets here are narrow and twisting, shaded by overhanging balconies. It's cooler, quieter. The houses are small but tidy, with courtyards open to the sky. A man sits cross-legged by the doorway, shaping clay into little tablets, practice work for an apprentice scribe. He glances up and grins. Harder than it looks, he says, though the language barrier makes it more of a guess than a translation. On one tablet, you spot something unusual, a list not of goods or rations, but of names. Beside each, a small drawing of a sheep or a loaf of bread. You realize it's an attendance sheet for temple workers. Bureaucracy, it seems, is one of humanity's longest-lasting religions. Further along, you find a small market square. Someone selling fish from a reed basket, another's hawking small charms shaped like crescent moons. A musician plucks a lyre nearby, its sound gentle and oddly familiar. It reminds you of lullabies, of quiet nights under the stars. A few children dance clumsily to the tune, laughing so hard they almost fall over. Civilization might have invented law codes and irrigation systems, but joy remains its simplest language. One quirky detail archaeologists uncovered: the people of loved their music so much they buried instruments with the dead. Harps, lyres, even flutes have been found in royal tombs. It's comforting to think that 5,000 years ago, someone believed melody was worth taking to the afterlife. As evening descends, the city changes color. The ziggurat glows amber in the setting sun, and the smell of roasting lamb drifts through the air. The priests begin their nightly rituals, lighting oil lamps along the temple terraces. From the top, the moon appears, pale and perfect, rising over the desert. You can almost imagine Nana himself stepping down its light, visiting his faithful city for a moment before retreating again into the heavens. The people of gather near the canals, cooling their feet in the water, chatting softly. Some release small reed boats carrying flickering lamps, a quiet offering to the moon god. You watch the lights drift downstream, bobbing like tiny stars on a dark river. There's a peace to it, a rhythm that feels older than time. As night deepens, you find a place to sit near the base of the ziggurat. The bricks radiate the day's warmth, comforting against the cooling air. Above you, constellations shimmer to life, the same ones those ancient astronomers once charted from rooftops and temple steps. They tracked them carefully, trying to find meaning in the heavens, patterns that could predict floods, harvests, maybe even fate. Historians still debate how advanced their astronomy really was, but one thing's certain: they looked up with wonder, just like you do now. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks, then another answers. A donkey brays in protest. Someone laughs, someone prays, and the city breathes on. The moon climbs higher, bathing the ziggurat in silver light, as if blessing it all over again. You close your eyes, letting the sound of distant water and soft music lull you into stillness. The ziggurat stands silent, proud, and unchanging, a stairway to the stars, built by hands that believed reaching up was as important as looking down. You can almost hear those ancient workers whispering through the bricks. We built this for you to remember us. And tonight, you do. You wake to the sound of water, steady, rhythmic, patient. The canal beside you glitters in the early light, a mirror for the peach-colored sky. You follow its gentle curve as it winds south toward Lagash, another of Mesopotamia's once great city-states. The air here feels different, humid, thick with the scent of wet earth and distant reeds. The hum of frogs rises from the shallows, and somewhere far off, you can hear the rhythmic creak of wooden shottuffs drawing water from the canals. Lagash was never the biggest or most glamorous city, but it was practical, fierce in trade, stubborn in governance, and unusually obsessed with fairness. You can already sense that mood as you approach its outer walls. They're lower than Ur's towering ramparts, but sturdier, with clean lines and careful symmetry. The people of Lagash built for utility, not grandeur. If Ur was poetry in brick, Lagash is a spreadsheet in stone. You cross a narrow bridge over the canal and step into the city. The streets here are wide enough for carts to pass without scraping walls, a small miracle in Mesopotamian urban planning. On either side, vendors are setting up stalls. One man unrolls a mat of copper tools, each shining faintly in the light. Another woman arranges clay jars filled with oil and grain. A group of men is already arguing over measurements, slapping the sides of baskets and waving their arms in frustration. You smile. Nothing says civilization quite like a morning argument about fair pricing. Historians still argue whether Lagash's reputation for justice was genuine or just clever propaganda. The city's ruler, Uruk famously issued what many call the world's first legal reforms. His decrees promised to protect widows and orphans, limit corruption, and stop the rich from exploiting the poor. Basically 24th century BCE labor laws, minus the union dues. Whether it truly worked is another story, but the clay tablets speak fondly of him, and that's something. You wander deeper, passing a scribe sitting cross-legged at the edge of the street. He's carefully inscribing a tablet, his tongue sticking out in concentration. You peek over his shoulder. It's not poetry, not trade records, it's a complaint. Someone's filed a grievance about a neighbor stealing irrigation water. The scribe sighs, scratches his beard, and mutters under his breath. Some things never change. Bureaucracy and neighbor drama, Mesopotamia's eternal combo meal. Following the narrow alleyways, you find yourself in the marketplace square. It's lively now. Spices, textiles, dried fish, and clay figurines stacked in neat pyramids. The smells are intoxicating. Cumin, sesame oil, roasted barley. Somewhere, a donkey snorts in protest, probably for good reason. You step aside to avoid a cart rolling by, its driver calling out cheerful warnings that sound more like threats. In the center of the square stands a tall stone stele, etched with symbols and figures. You move closer. The carvings depict a ruler, muscular, bearded, standing triumphant over smaller figures. It's Eonatum, an earlier king of Lagash, and this monument is famous, the Stele of the Vultures. Its name comes from the grim upper panel, vultures swooping down over a battlefield, picking at fallen soldiers. A strange image for a city known for fairness, you think, but Mesopotamia was nothing if not complicated. The lower panels are different though. Rows of men marching in perfect formation, led by their king. You realize it's not just propaganda, it's history carved into stone. One mainstream fact, this is one of the earliest known depictions of organized warfare. You can almost hear the sound of marching feet, the clatter of bronze spears. War, it seems, is another human invention that refused to stay buried. Still, Lagash's people tried to balance power with order. You pass the temple district, where priests in linen robes tally offerings on clay boards. Behind them, canals shimmer between temples dedicated to Ningirsu, the city's chief deity. The temples double as warehouses, granaries, and administrative centers. Religion and government rolled into one efficient system. The sound of reed pens scratching clay fills the air like a chorus of tiny insects. You stop by one of the temple courtyards, where a young acolyte tends to pigeons fluttering in wicker cages. Offerings, he explains, gesturing proudly. They're for the gods, but you suspect some will end up roasted for dinner later. He offers to show you the granary, a massive hall lined with storage jars. Inside, the air is cool and heavy with the scent of grain. The acolyte points to a section where seals mark each jar's owner. Fairness, he says, tapping his chest. Everyone's share, safe. You nod. It's oddly comforting, this obsession with recorded equity. Historians still debate whether these early reforms in Lagash were moral acts or strategic moves to control unrest. Maybe both. Maybe civilization's first step toward justice was simply realizing that too many angry farmers with shovels are bad for business. You step back into the sunlight. It's hotter now, the kind of heat that sticks to your skin. You follow a line of workers toward the irrigation fields outside the city. The canals stretch out like a geometric web, each branch measured, controlled, and shared among families. Men in loincloths bide water with wooden gates, diverting it toward plots of barley. The soil squelches under their feet. A woman stands nearby, singing to her children as they gather reeds for weaving. Her song rises and falls with the rhythm of the water, melancholy but soothing. You crouch to touch the muddy edge of the canal. The water feels cool, alive. You remember that without this, there'd be no Lagash, no cities at all, just dust and hunger. Every drop is life, and every argument over its flow is a small reflection of the human story itself. Survival, negotiation, balance. A local overseer walks past, counting off instructions. He wears a necklace of baked clay beads, each one carved with marks of ownership. He's probably a manager, though manager feels like too modern a word for someone carrying a reed whip. He stops briefly, squints at you, and mutters something that sounds suspiciously like, "Don't touch the canal." You raise your hands in apology. He moves on. Some hierarchies are timeless too. By late afternoon, the air smells of wet clay and baking bread. The farmers return to the city, their clothes streaked with mud, their laughter easy. You follow them back through the gates, past children chasing a dog through the dust. Someone's playing a drum somewhere, slow and lazy. The day winds down like a sigh. At sunset, you sit near the temple steps. The stone glows orange, and long shadows stretch across the courtyard. Priests light oil lamps, their flames flickering in the warm air. You watch as people file in, farmers, potters, scribes, offering handfuls of grain, a clay figurine, a small loaf of bread. They whisper their prayers quietly, their faces calm. It's a city that believes in rules and rituals, not chaos or kings screaming from the rooftops. There's comfort in that predictability, in knowing that fairness, however fragile, is at least attempted. A gentle breeze rises from the west, carrying the scent of the river. The stars appear slowly, shy at first, then bold. You stretch out on the temple steps, feeling the stone still warm beneath you. Somewhere in the distance, a flute begins to play. As you drift toward sleep, the city murmurs softly around you. Scribes closing tablets, workers finishing their last chores, the canals whispering their endless lullaby. You think of Uruk's towering ziggurat and Ur's moonlit temple, and now Lagash is quiet order. Each city different, each human, each trying to make sense of life in a world of clay and flood and fire. The night deepens. The lamps flicker low, and under the endless Mesopotamian sky, Lagash breathes steadily, fair, flawed, and beautifully ordinary. You wake before dawn, the world still gray and damp, and the faint light just beginning to stretch across the plain. The air smells faintly of smoke and wet reeds. Somewhere, a donkey brays, offended at the concept of morning. You gather your things and follow the dusty road east, away from Lagash, toward another city long swallowed by time, Larsa. Larsa doesn't look like much at first. You see low mounds of clay and scattered bits of brick. But as you walk closer, the outlines of streets, foundations, and canals appear beneath your feet like ghosts surfacing through dust. The city was once a rival to mighty Ur, and for a brief flicker of history, it even ruled much of southern Mesopotamia. Now it's quiet, the desert gently reclaiming it grain by grain. You pass the remains of what used to be a ziggurat, a giant step pyramid dedicated to the sun god Utu, also known as Shamash. Only the lowest tiers survive, eroded and crumbling, but even in ruin, there's something solemn about it. You imagine what it looked like when it was new. Gleaming white plaster, banners flapping in the hot wind, priests climbing its steps with offerings of incense and oil. You pause at the base of the structure and sit for a moment. The sun god's temple, you recall, was not just a place of worship. It was the heart of Larsa's bureaucracy. Here, scribes recorded everything: crop yields, marriages, debts, temple donations, legal disputes, even deliveries of beer. It's comforting to think that 4,000 years ago, someone was already filling out the ancient equivalent of spreadsheets before breakfast. Larsa's most famous ruler was Rimsin I, who reigned for over 60 years, an almost mythic span for a Bronze Age king. Under his rule, Larsa became a regional powerhouse, controlling trade routes and irrigation systems. His name appears on countless tablets, stamped like a corporate logo across half of southern Mesopotamia. You can't help imagining his scribes groaning every time they had to carve his 12-syllable royal title into clay. But history is never tidy. Historians still argue whether Rimsin's long reign was a time of genuine prosperity or slow decay. Some see him as a capable administrator who kept the canals flowing and the granaries full. Others paint him as a tired monarch who clung to old systems while Babylon, young, ambitious Babylon, rose in the north. You can almost hear the whispers of rebellion blowing across the plain. You wander through what was once the residential district. The streets are narrow, winding between mud brick walls that crumble at your touch. You step over the threshold of a house, its floor still lined with baked bricks. The layout feels familiar. A central courtyard open to the sky, rooms around it. The kitchen is just a corner with a low clay hearth and fragments of pottery. Someone once cooked lentils here. Someone once laughed here. You pick up a small clay tablet lying half buried in dust. It's blank, uninscribed, maybe a discarded one, maybe one that never got its message written. For a moment, it feels strange, almost intimate, holding the medium of thought in your hand, the very stuff of memory, story, law. Then you remember that someone had to carry thousands of these to record every loaf, every jug, every tax. Ancient admin life wasn't glamorous. You smile. Somewhere, a long-dead scribe deserves a raise. As you step outside, the morning heat begins to rise. You follow a shallow canal, dry now, but its shape still carved deep into the land. You can picture how it once glistened with water, feeding the fields. Workers would have walked here barefoot, guiding the current with wooden gates, shouting to each other over the sound of splashing water and bleating goats. You pause beside a half-collapsed wall etched with cuneiform signs. Most are faded beyond recognition, but one line catches your eye, a prayer to Utu, the bringer of justice and light. It reads, in rough translation, May the wronged find truth in your dawn. You whisper it under your breath, feeling the weight of that plea. How human it sounds even now. Justice and morning light, things everyone still hopes for, no matter the century. Further ahead, you find what might have been a school. Rows of small benches carved from clay line the walls. On the floor are fragments of practice tablets, signs repeated over and over again, probably by weary student scribes. You imagine the teacher hovering nearby, correcting a trembling hand. No, that wedge goes this way. You chuckle quietly. The first detention slips probably started here. One quirky detail you remember, archaeologists once found a teacher's note complaining about lazy students in ancient Larsa. It basically says, the boy does not apply himself. So yes, 4,000 years ago, kids were still daydreaming through class, and teachers were still writing passive-aggressive progress reports. Some aspects of humanity, apparently, never evolve. You take a detour toward what remains of the temple's storage halls. Inside, the air is cooler. Thick walls block the sun. You run your fingers across ancient seal impressions, tiny, intricate emblems pressed into wet clay. They belong to merchants, priests, accountants, maybe even farmers. Each seal tells a small story: who they were, what they traded, who they trusted. There's a faint hum in your mind as you imagine the bustle of Larsa at its height. Donkeys hauling grain sacks, temple scribes yelling for receipts, vendors haggling over dates and oil. The whole place alive, noisy, human. And yet, it all depended on the quiet rhythm of the canals. Without water, everything stopped. You look out toward the dry channels and feel a small ache. Cities die quietly, not in battle, but in thirst. By midday, you find a shaded spot beneath the remnants of a mud brick wall and rest. The sun is merciless now, the sky white and empty. You sip from your canteen and glance toward the horizon. Beyond the shimmering air lies Babylon, and beyond that, other cities that rose and fell, their names half forgotten. You think of how fragile they all were, built from mud and willpower. A sudden breeze stirs, carrying dust and the faint scent of salt from a nearby marsh. You hear the faint chirp of crickets, the soft flap of a bird's wings. For a moment, the city seems alive again, just shadows moving, whispering of its past. As afternoon stretches on, you make your way back toward the ruins of the ziggurat. You climb its lowest step, rough and warm beneath your hands, and sit facing west. The light begins to change, the color deepening from gold to amber to soft rose. It's easy to see why they worship the sun here. You feel its warmth fade slowly from your skin, replaced by the cool touch of evening air. You imagine Rim-Sin's priests at this very spot, thousands of years ago, chanting hymns as the sun dipped below the horizon. Maybe they watched the same fading glow and felt the same quiet awe. Maybe one of them, exhausted after a long day of records and rituals, simply sat down and thought, "This, right here, is enough." The sky darkens to purple. You lie back against the stone and stare upward. Stars begin to appear, faint, scattered at first, then thick and bright, as if the heavens themselves were writing a story. You trace the constellations that ancient astronomers of Larsa once charted. They used them to track time, to plan harvests, to predict the flooding of the rivers. It was their calendar, their science, their faith rolled into one. You take a deep breath. The night air is cool now, scented faintly with dust and baked clay. You think about how much of this world has been lost, how civilizations rise, thrive, and then quietly fade, leaving only fragments and echoes. But here, sitting on the bones of a forgotten city, you realize something simple and steady. Humanity never really disappears. It just changes form, like the Tigris shifting its course, but always flowing toward the same sea. Somewhere far away, a dog barks. The sound echoes across the empty plain. You close your eyes and listen to the silence that follows, vast, deep, and strangely peaceful. When you wake, the morning air is cool and heavy with mist. The horizon glows faintly, just enough to outline the distant shapes of low hills and the faint shimmer of canals long since choked with silt. You stretch, shake the dust from your cloak, and continue northward. Your next stop lies hidden beneath centuries of silence, Eridu, the city that started it all. It's hard to imagine now, as you trudge across cracked earth and scattered pottery shards, but this was once the first city, the cradle of urban life. Archaeologists call it the earliest known city in southern Mesopotamia, maybe even the first city in the world. The birthplace of civilization, or at least of that ambitious human experiment called settling down and arguing about irrigation. The land flattens, and there it is, a low mound rising gently from the plain, rippling with pale grasses. That's all that's left of Eridu, 30 or so layers of temples stacked one atop another, each new generation building over the bones of the old. You climb slowly, feeling the clay crumble beneath your shoes. Every step takes you further back in time, past the kings of past the scribes of Lagash, past even the earliest writing. This is the deep beginning, when myths and mud were still indistinguishable. You reach the top and sit on a half-buried brick wall, catching your breath. The world around you feels vast, untouched. In every direction, the land stretches endlessly, flat, golden, timeless. Somewhere beneath your feet lies the ancient temple of Enki, the god of water, wisdom, and mischief. He was the kind of deity who solved problems with clever tricks rather than brute force. You like him already. Eridu was founded around 5400 BCE, thousands of years before the Great Pyramids, before writing, before metal tools. It began as a humble fishing village beside a freshwater lagoon, but over time, it grew into a center of worship and trade. Clay houses multiplied, reed huts gave way to brick, and at its heart rose a small temple that expanded with every passing century. Eventually, that temple became one of the earliest ziggurats. You walk among the broken foundations, trying to imagine what it once looked like. A courtyard filled with people carrying jars of fish and grain, priests in woven skirts chanting softly, the smell of burning reeds drifting upward, and behind it all, the murmur of water, cool, clean, and sacred. It's strange to think of this land as once fertile, lush, threaded with streams and lagoons. Now it's mostly dust, but if you close your eyes, you can almost hear the lap of waves against ancient docks. Historians still argue whether Eridu was a real city or more of a religious center, a holy site people visited seasonally rather than lived in permanently. The line between myth and archaeology blurs here. Sumerian kings listed Eridu as their first royal city, and according to the Sumerian king list, it was the place where kingship descended from heaven. You smile at that, because really every ancient city thought it was the first. Humans have always been good at self-promotion. You crouch near a pit where excavations once exposed the temple's layers. The bricks here are older than memory itself, hand-shaped, sun-dried, marked with the faint fingerprints of the builders. You trace the indentations with your fingertips. Somewhere, someone, 5,000 or 6,000 years ago, pressed their hands into this same clay. You feel the weight of time narrow to a single breath. A faint rustle catches your ear. You turn and spot a small desert fox watching from a distance. Its fur glows gold in the early light. You blink, and it's gone, silent as a whisper. Maybe it's just curious, or maybe the god Enki still keeps his little messengers about. You decide not to question it. You wander down toward the dry basin that was once the Eridu Lagoon. The ground crunches beneath your feet. Salt crystals shimmer faintly across the surface like frost. Once, this lagoon connected to the Persian Gulf, bringing fish, reeds, and trade goods from faraway coasts. You picture reed boats gliding through the water, their sails catching the breeze, men calling out as they haul nets heavy with fish. You pause and glance back toward the ruins. The temple's silhouette stands against the sky, small, patient, enduring. You think about how the Sumerians believed Eridu was the home of creation itself. In their myths, this was where Enki lived in his watery palace, the Abzu, deep beneath the earth. From here, wisdom flowed outward like rivers, spreading civilization to other lands. You can almost hear the splash of divine water echoing in the quiet air. One quirky tidbit, some early excavations in the 1940s uncovered offerings of fish bones and shells buried beneath the temple floors. It turns out ancient priests had a thing for seafood tributes, proof that faith and dinner have always gone hand in hand. You imagine the priests of Enki presenting freshly caught fish to the god, muttering prayers while probably wondering if they could sneak one for themselves later. The sun rises higher, and the air starts to shimmer. You find a small patch of shade beside a tumbled wall and sit down. A faint breeze brings the smell of salt and dust. Insects buzz lazily. For a while, you just watch the horizon. This place feels peaceful in its emptiness, as if time itself has gone to sleep here. But Eridu didn't fade because of war or disaster. It simply dried up. Over centuries, the coastline retreated, the lagoon vanished, and the canals filled with silt. The people drifted away toward fresher waters and greener lands. Civilization moved north to and Uruk, leaving its birthplace behind. You can almost hear their footsteps fading, their voices swallowed by the wind. Historians still debate what Eridu's decline means. Was it the first environmental collapse? A simple shift in trade? Or maybe just proof that every beginning carries the seed of its own end? Whatever the reason, it's humbling. You think of all the cities that came after, each convinced it would last forever, and realize how quietly even greatness dissolves. You lie back and close your eyes for a moment. The heat hums around you, and the earth radiates warmth through your spine. In the distance, a hawk circles lazily overhead. You can almost imagine the city alive again. Children splashing in the shallows, women weaving reed mats, priests chanting by torchlight. The sound fades in and out like waves on an unseen shore. When you open your eyes again, the world feels softer, slower. The ruins no longer seem like loss, but memory, a gentle persistence. Civilization didn't vanish here, it started. Every city, every story, every piece of writing that came after owes something to this patch of cracked clay. You stand, brush off your hands, and take one last look at Eridu. The wind picks up, whirling a small cloud of dust across the temple mound. It looks almost alive for a moment, like the ghost of a city exhaling. You smile faintly and whisper a quiet thanks to Enki, patron of wisdom and fresh water. Maybe he'll send you a dream tonight filled with trickling streams and cool blue lagoons. As the sun climbs toward noon, you begin walking north again. The earth glitters with salt. Each step crunches softly. Behind you, Eridu fades back into the haze, still keeping its secrets, still dreaming beneath the sand. The morning sun is already warm as you make your way north, following the faint ribbon of a canal that once guided water from the great rivers to countless fields and cities. The plain stretches endlessly, pale gold and brown, interrupted only by the occasional palm or crumbling mound of brick. Ahead lies Nippur, one of Mesopotamia's most sacred cities, and though its ruins are modest, its influence on Sumerian religion and law was monumental. As you approach, you notice how different Nippur feels from Lagash, or Eridu. There's no massive ziggurat vying for attention, no bustling market demanding your eyes and ears. Instead, the city exudes a quiet authority, a calm weight. It was here that the Sumerians believed the gods met and decided the fate of humanity. And even now, thousands of years later, that sacred echo lingers in the air. You step through what remains of a city gate, its mud brick walls soft under your fingers. The streets are narrow and winding, as if designed for privacy rather than spectacle. You pass small dwellings, low but carefully maintained. A few goats graze among the ruins, and the faint smell of burning reeds drifts from a distant hearth. Somewhere nearby, a water carrier chants rhythmically, the cadence of his song blending with the soft rush of a trickling canal. Nippur was the religious heart of Sumer, home to the temple of Enlil, the god of wind and king of the gods. Unlike Uruk Ziggurat or Ur's moonlit temple, Nippur's power came not from size or riches, but from spiritual authority. Kings and rulers from surrounding cities often traveled here to gain legitimacy, to receive the blessing of Enlil before making decisions that affected entire regions. You wander into the temple precincts, where the remains of shrines and courtyards lie scattered. The ground is uneven, dotted with fragments of clay and stone. Here, priests once recorded offerings, performed rituals, and ensured that the delicate balance between humans and gods remained intact. Even in ruins, the layout reflects careful planning. Spaces for meditation, storage, and ceremonies, all organized with precision. Historians still argue whether Nippur was primarily a religious center or also a hub of administration. Some tablets suggest detailed records of trade and taxation, hinting that bureaucracy ran quietly alongside worship. You pause to examine a fragment of tablet lying half buried in the dust. The wedge-shaped inscriptions are worn, but you can just make out numbers and symbols, likely records of grain or livestock. It's ordinary yet extraordinary, the daily life of a city intertwined seamlessly with devotion and law. Walking further into the city, you find a small shaded courtyard. Sunlight filters through the remnants of a wooden roof, casting slatted shadows across the floor. The smell here is sweet and earthy, a mix of baked clay, incense, and faint herbs once used in offerings. A priest's robe lies folded neatly on a low bench, untouched for centuries. You can imagine him here long ago, chanting prayers to Enlil, murmuring invocations that sought to protect the city from drought, disease, and war. A few children from surrounding villages, invisible to history but surely present once, might have played along these streets. Archaeologists found small toys and clay figurines in Nippur, suggesting that even in the shadow of temples and power, ordinary life carried on. You pick up a tiny, crudely molded figure of a goat, smooth from countless hands handling it. Someone, somewhere, laughed while giving it to a child, probably unaware that you'd be holding it thousands of years later. The canals outside the temple precinct hum with life even now. You trace the path of one main channel, imagining water flowing to the fields, carrying sustenance and stability to the city. Without these channels, Nippur would have been just another patch of clay and sun. With them, it became a hub of influence, sustaining priests, scribes, and rulers alike. You kneel and dip your fingers into the shallow water, imagining how its gentle flow nurtured civilization itself. One quirky detail, some excavations revealed miniature clay boats buried in Nippur's temple foundations. Scholars speculate they were offerings to Enlil, symbolic voyages to carry prayers upstream. You smile at the thought. Ancient Mesopotamians believing that tiny clay boats could travel between mortals and gods, carrying hopes, worries, and maybe the occasional complaint about irrigation. You wander into the city's residential quarters. The streets here are quieter, lined with simple mud brick homes. Courtyards are open, filled with small trees and pots of grain. A few women move silently, carrying water from the canal, their footsteps soft against the clay floors. You imagine the smells of cooking, roasted fish, lentils, barley bread, mixing with incense and fresh water. Civilization here was quiet and orderly, a rhythm of life grounded in devotion and necessity. Historians still argue how much power Nippur wielded in practice. Was it truly a city of spiritual authority, able to dictate the rise and fall of kings? Or was its influence symbolic, amplified by later generations of scribes and priests? You think about how power often works: quiet, subtle, persistent. Not always in shouts or battles, but in rituals, laws, and the steady hum of daily life. You follow a narrow alley that leads to a small plaza, where remnants of a marketplace suggest that ordinary commerce still mattered. You imagine merchants arranging jars of oil, baskets of dates, and bundles of reeds for sale. Farmers from surrounding villages might have arrived with sheep or barley. The hum of trade, though modest compared to Uruk or still pulsed here, a reminder that even sacred cities relied on the ordinary. As the sun climbs higher, the city seems to awaken in fragments. You see the faint outlines of workshops where metalworkers shaped copper and bronze tools. Potters' kilns would have smoked here, their fires measured and controlled, shaping vessels that held grain, water, and wine. The combination of work, devotion, and simple survival creates a rhythm that feels oddly timeless. You pause near the ruins of the central ziggurat, imagining the priests atop its steps as the wind blows through the temple towers. Their chants rise and fall, calling to gods and humans alike. It's a rhythm of time, repeated over generations, grounding the city in both physical and spiritual sustenance. By evening, the light softens. Shadows stretch across the streets and temples, bathing Nippur in a gentle amber glow. The canals catch the last streaks of sunlight, reflecting it like liquid gold. You settle near a low wall and watch as the city seems to exhale, its noise replaced by quiet, water trickling, a soft wind in reeds, the faint hum of insects. As darkness falls, the stars emerge. Constellations glimmer like tiny altars in the sky, the same ones that priests of Nippur once charted to track time, seasons, and omens. You lie back on the cool earth, listening to the faint rustle of the wind and imagining the city alive once more. People moving, children playing, merchants calling softly, priests chanting in low, hypnotic rhythms. Nippur, quiet and steadfast, seems to pulse beneath the stars. Not the flashiest city, not the loudest, but enduring, an anchor in the ever-shifting currents of Mesopotamian civilization. And here, in the shadow of its ruins, you understand something essential. Influence doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers, shaping minds, law, and devotion across generations. The morning air carries a faint chill as you leave Nippur behind, tracing a dusty path north toward Kish, another city whose name echoes across ancient Mesopotamian history. The plain stretches endlessly, pale under the rising sun, dotted with the occasional reed clump and low, crumbling mound that hints at past life. Kish was once a beacon of power, claiming kingship over Sumer, a place where ambition and authority took shape in mud and brick. As you approach, you notice the city's unique layout. Unlike the sprawling grids of Uruk or the tidy organization of Lagash, Kish spreads organically, its streets twisting in gentle curves. It feels like a city grown rather than built, shaped by generations of human activity rather than by a single ruler's grand vision. You step carefully over uneven bricks and scattered pottery shards, tracing the invisible patterns of streets long abandoned. One mainstream fact: Kish is famous for being considered the first city to claim kingship after the Great Flood described in Sumerian myth. Kings of Kish were said to hold the kingship of Sumer, a title granting them symbolic authority over the region. You imagine the pomp and ceremony this entailed: parades, offerings, decrees, but also the heavy weight of expectation. Leaders here carried not just power, but the sense of destiny itself.
a responsibility woven into the fabric of city life.
You wander into what was likely the city center. The remains of a ziggurat rise faintly from the ground, more modest than those in or Uruk, but still commanding attention. Its eroded steps hint at the countless pilgrims and priests who once ascended them, offering prayers and sacrifices to the city's patron deity. You kneel near the base, letting your fingers brush the warm, sun-baked bricks. Someone pressed them here thousands of years ago, and in that small, intimate act, time collapses into a single, enduring moment. Historians still argue whether Kish's political supremacy was genuine or mostly ceremonial. Some believe the city truly exercised control over surrounding regions, directing trade and collecting tribute. Others think it was more symbolic, a city whose kingship was recognized in myth and official lists, but rarely enforced through direct power. Either way, the claim itself shaped Mesopotamian politics, a reminder that authority can be as much about perception as reality. You follow a narrow alley that leads toward the residential district. The street is quiet, flanked by low mud brick houses. Courtyards open to the sky, and faint traces of hearths suggest where families once cooked, laughed, and argued over small domestic matters. You find a tiny clay figurine, a man with exaggerated features, possibly a guardian figure or a toy. You imagine it placed on a shelf, its gaze watching over the household for centuries. Someone, long dead, probably whispered a hope into that clay. May it protect us. The smell of cooking drifts faintly from the past. You can almost picture a woman kneading dough, a child chasing a chicken, and a goat tethered near a wall, bleeding in protest. Everyday life, the mundane rhythms of human existence, played out under the shadow of monumental ambition. Even in a city claiming kingship over Sumer, ordinary concerns, the cost of grain, the speed of the irrigation gates, the temperament of livestock, remained constant. One quirky detail, archaeologists found Kish tablets recording the wages of prostitutes, laborers, and temple staff. You pause, imagining scribes meticulously noting who earned what, who owed what, and who was owed affection or attention. Some things never change. Humans, it seems, always need records, whether for tax, devotion, or simple curiosity. You continue to the canal district, the arteries that brought life to the city. Water glimmers faintly in shallow channels, the remnants of a once complex irrigation system. Farmers would have guided it carefully, directing each drop to fields of barley and wheat. The canals carried more than water. They carried security, wealth, and the pulse of civilization itself. You crouch to touch the surface, imagining the hands that once shaped these channels with mud and reeds. Nearby, a small temple foundation rises no more than a few feet from the ground. Its walls are etched with faint impressions, signs that priests once carefully inscribed. The temple served multiple purposes: a place of worship, a center for administration, and a hub for learning. Scribes would have recorded offerings, deaths, and contracts within its cool, shadowed interior. The combination of religion and bureaucracy reminds you that in Mesopotamia, life was never purely sacred or secular. It was always a blend, a rhythm of devotion and duty. As afternoon settles in, you find a quiet courtyard near the marketplace. The scent of clay, dust, and faint herbs hangs in the air. Merchants once displayed pottery, oil, and textiles, while farmers brought baskets of grain and bundles of reeds. Children would have darted between stalls, laughing, playing, and sometimes causing minor chaos. You can almost hear the soft clatter of clay pots, the creak of carts, the occasional scolding voice. Life unfolding quietly but insistently. Historians still debate Kish's role in regional trade. Some tablets suggest it was a hub for exchanging metals, textiles, and stuffs. Others think its influence was more symbolic, its claim to kingship overshadowing its economic activity. Either way, the evidence tells you that Kish mattered, not always in the way we expect, but in ways that shaped the Sumerian world. The sun begins to sink low in the sky, casting long, soft shadows across the ruins. You find a place atop a low mound and sit, feeling the warmth of baked clay beneath you. The wind carries a faint hum of insects and the occasional bird call. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the quiet wash over you. Imagine priests climbing the ziggurat steps, scribes tallying temple offerings, children playing in shaded courtyards, all lives flowing together, ephemeral yet recorded in stone and clay. As night falls, the stars appear slowly, scattered across the sky. The constellations are familiar: Orion, the Pleiades, the same ones that guided sailors and priests in distant cities. You lie back, feeling the quiet pulse of Kish beneath you. The city's claim to kingship, its religious authority, its ordinary human life, all converge in a soft, enduring presence that still whispers across the millennia. Somewhere in the distance, a fox calls softly, answering the wind. You breathe in, letting the scent of dust and earth settle. Kish, like the cities before it, survives not in stone alone, but in memory, myth, and the delicate traces of everyday life. And tonight, sitting among its ruins, you realize that influence can be quiet, subtle, and persistent, a legacy of rhythm, devotion, and human resilience. The morning air is dry and still as you leave Kish behind, following the faint curve of an ancient roadway that leads you east toward the ruins of Uruk, one of the oldest and most storied cities of Mesopotamia. Even now, the sheer scale of Uruk impresses as its low mounds rise against the horizon, ghostly reminders of walls, temples, and streets long buried beneath centuries of silt and sand. The land here shimmers in heat, the horizon blurring, but the city's past looms large. Uruk was enormous in its time, home to tens of thousands of people and sprawling over more than 100 hectares. It's often considered the first true metropolis, a city with defined districts, monumental architecture, and even the earliest known form of writing. You follow the faint outlines of streets and walls, imagining the hum of daily life when this place thrived. Markets, workshops, canals, and temples all converging in a living network of human activity. Uruk is credited with the invention of writing, specifically cuneiform, around 3200 BCE. Scribes began using wedge-shaped impressions in clay to record transactions, inventories, and eventually stories, laws, and myths. You kneel to touch the faint remnants of a clay tablet lying half-buried, tracing the tiny impressions with your fingertips. Thousands of years ago, a hand pressed the same symbols here, attempting to make sense of the world, to impose order on chaos. The outer walls of Uruk are vast, massive, and imposing even in ruin. You trace the crumbling outlines with your eyes, imagining the monumental effort required to build them. Mud brick after mud brick, shaped by hands both skilled and tired, stacked to protect a city bursting with life. Somewhere, children must have played along the streets. Vendors must have shouted from stalls, and the scent of baked bread and fish must have drifted through the air, mingling with the smoke of countless hearths. Historians still debate how much control the Uruk rulers exercised over the surrounding region. Some claim the city dominated through sheer economic and political power, while others suggest that influence was more symbolic, a combination of myth, religious authority, and careful negotiation with neighboring settlements. Either way, Uruk set a precedent. A city could be more than a collection of dwellings. It could be a hub of civilization, a place where ideas and governance converged. You wander into the temple precinct, where the remains of the Anu ziggurat rise faintly from the ground. This was a religious heart of the city, dedicated to the sky god Anu, with ceremonial spaces designed to impress, inspire, and awe. The steps, though partially eroded, hint at the grand processions and ritual ceremonies that once took place here. You imagine priests ascending these steps in long robes, carrying offerings of grain, oil, and incense,
their voices rising in chants that must have echoed across the plain. One quirky detail, archaeologists discovered small figurines in Uruk's temple precincts, some depicting musicians, others animals, and some abstract forms whose purpose remains a mystery. Were they offerings, toys, magical talismans? You smile, imagining a priest carefully arranging a tiny clay goat on a shelf while muttering prayers, probably hoping it would help with irrigation or ward off misfortune. Faith and practicality often collided in charming, unexpected ways.
As you explore the residential quarter, the layout becomes apparent. Streets arranged with a semblance of order, houses surrounding small courtyards, and workshops tucked discreetly behind. Pottery fragments litter the ground, shards of jars that once held oil, water, and beer. You pick one up, feeling the warmth of clay hardened under the sun. Somewhere in its curve, it carries the imprint of a potter's hand, the fingerprint of someone who once shaped civilization out of mud.
You pass a small square that likely served as a market. Imagine merchants here shouting over the din, arranging baskets of dates, jars of oil, and woven mats. Children chase each other between stalls, tripping occasionally over clay pots, laughter mixing with the calls of vendors. You can hear the faint echo of barter, of negotiation, of human life humming persistently through time. Historians still argue about the social structure of Uruk. Was it governed primarily by priestly authority, kingly decree, or a combination of bureaucratic management and trade influence? Evidence suggests a layered system. Temples managed food and resources, kings asserted political authority, and merchants facilitated exchange. The city was an early experiment in complexity, balancing devotion, governance, and commerce with careful, if sometimes precarious, precision. Following a faint canal, you trace the irrigation channels that once fed Uruk's fields. Water here was everything: security, sustenance, and stability. Farmers would have guided its flow with wooden gates, careful not to flood one field while starving another. You kneel beside the shallow water and dip your fingers, feeling a direct, tactile connection to the lives of those who tended the land millennia ago. Without canals, Uruk could not have thrived. Civilization depended always on control of water. As afternoon drifts toward evening, the sun casts long shadows across the ruins. You climb a small mound, one of the remains of a city wall, and look back over Uruk. The city stretches like a memory frozen in clay and brick. The temple precinct, the residential quarters, the markets, the canals, all woven into a quiet tapestry of human activity. You imagine the city at its peak, alive with tens of thousands of people, and feel the weight of its ambition and ingenuity. One of the strangest discoveries in Uruk is the presence of cylinder seals, tiny carved cylinders rolled across clay to leave an imprint. They were both practical and personal, used to authorize documents, mark ownership, and sometimes to display artistry. You pick up an imagined seal, rolling it across a clay tablet in your mind. Even here, thousands of years ago, humans sought both order and expression, efficiency and creativity intertwined in a small object. By evening, the air cools, and a soft wind carries dust and faint scents of the plain. You settle atop a mound and watch as stars begin to appear, timidly at first, then boldly against the darkening sky. You can imagine ancient astronomers tracing their paths, priests using them to mark festivals, farmers to time their harvests. The night falls gently, and Uruk seems to breathe under the sky, a city alive in memory, in myth, in the tiny traces left behind. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks, then silence. The city exhales softly through time. You lean back, letting the warmth of the clay seep into you and reflect on the enormity of what once was. Uruk may be ruins now, but it lives in the patterns of human thought, in writing, governance, and the very idea of what a city can be. Its legacy is quiet but persistent, a reminder that even in decay, civilization endures in whispers and echoes. The morning sun spills across the plain as you rise and begin your journey northward from Uruk, following the faint trace of an ancient road that once connected thriving city-states like a lifeline of civilization. Your next destination is the legendary city of where ziggurats pierce the sky and the hum of human endeavor once resonated through streets and canals alike. Even in ruin, the city exudes an unmistakable aura of grandeur and permanence, a stark contrast to the quiet, sprawling forms of cities you've walked through before. Was enormous in its heyday, a city of tens of thousands, with bustling markets, sprawling neighborhoods, and a network of canals irrigating fields far beyond its walls. You trace the outline of the city's massive walls, imagining the effort it took to build them from baked brick, layer upon layer, under the hot sun. You imagine families of laborers, their hands blistered, shaping the mud and clay that would become history. Each brick holds a story, pressed with fingerprints that have long since turned to dust. Is most famous for its ziggurat, a monumental temple dedicated to Nana, the moon god. Rising from the center of the city, it served not just as a religious site, but as a hub for administration and economic activity. You wander among the lower steps, imagining priests ascending with offerings, the scent of incense curling upward as their chants echo across the plain. The ziggurat was more than stone and clay. It was a focal point of Ur's identity, a symbol of power, piety, and permanence. You wander into the residential district, where narrow streets wind between mud brick houses. Each home is built around a central courtyard, open to the sky, providing light and air while keeping the family life private. You can almost see children running barefoot through the dust, chasing each other around pottery jars and piles of reeds. Women carry water from nearby canals, their soft songs blending with the clatter of cooking and the occasional bray of a donkey. Life here is intimate and ordinary, set against the backdrop of monumental ambition. Historians still argue about the social hierarchy of Evidence suggests a layered society. Priests wielding spiritual authority, kings asserting political power, and merchants and artisans ensuring economic vitality. The interplay between these groups likely created both stability and tension, a delicate balance maintained through ritual, law, and the careful distribution of resources. You kneel beside the remains of a small clay tablet, imagining the scribe who pressed each symbol with meticulous care, recording a transaction, a prayer, or a legal decree. The marketplace beckons, its former vibrancy visible in the outlines of stalls and streets. You imagine merchants arranging pottery, baskets of dates, oil jars, and woven mats. Farmers from the countryside arrive with bundles of grain, barley, and reed mats, calling out softly to negotiate prices. You can hear the hum of barter, the subtle cadence of voices negotiating survival and prosperity in a language long since silent. The city thrived because of its people, their labor, and their interactions. The small gestures of daily life layered over grand temples and official decrees. One quirky detail, archaeologists discovered musical instruments in including small lyres decorated with inlaid shells. You imagine the faint, soft strumming of a lyre in the evening, a musician's fingers trembling slightly as they play for a gathering, or perhaps for a solitary priest in the temple courtyard. Music, it seems, has always been part of human life, a thread weaving through the fabric of civilization, soothing, inspiring, and connecting people across generations. You follow the edge of the canal district, tracing the shallow, sunlit waters that once sustained crops and animals. Farmers would have guided the flow with wooden gates, carefully distributing water to fields of barley, wheat, and vegetables. Without these canals, could not have survived, and you feel the hum of human ingenuity in the faint ripple of water. The management of water was not just practical, but symbolic, control over life itself. Historians still debate whether the grandeur of Ur's ziggurat was primarily religious or political. Was it meant to impress the populace, assert divine authority, or both? The evidence suggests a combination: a place of worship, a center of administration, and a symbol visible for miles, reminding both citizens and neighboring cities of Ur's influence. You imagine how the first light of dawn would catch its steps, turning them golden, and how people below might have looked up in awe, or perhaps in quiet irritation at the constant reminder of power above them. You wander to the cemetery on the outskirts of the city, where royal tombs lie buried beneath mounds of earth. Although much has been excavated and cataloged, the silence here is profound, punctuated only by the faint whisper of wind through sparse grasses. You kneel by a collapsed tomb, imagining the ceremonies that once surrounded it: offerings, chants, and careful rituals meant to honor the dead and protect the living. Even now, the earth seems to hum with memory, a quiet resonance of lives once intertwined with this city's enduring pulse. As afternoon stretches into evening, the sky softens to pale gold. Shadows lengthen across the streets and walls, and the city seems to breathe slowly, a living memory of devotion, commerce, governance, and ordinary life. You climb a small mound near the ziggurat and sit, feeling the warmth of the sun-baked clay beneath you. From this vantage point, you can imagine Ur in its prime: bustling markets, chanting priests, children darting through courtyards, and the distant shimmer of canals glinting in sunlight. You notice the remnants of workshops scattered around the city: potters shaping clay, metalworkers hammering bronze, weavers stretching reeds into mats. Ordinary labor carried out with care and precision, sustaining the grandeur of temples and palaces. Civilization, you think, is both monumental and mundane, built not just on ambition, but on the quiet, persistent work of countless hands. The sun dips low, casting long, gentle shadows across the ruins. You lean back, letting the fading warmth seep into your skin, and watch the stars slowly appear. The constellations are the same ones Ur's astronomers charted thousands of years ago, guiding planting, harvest, and ritual. The city exhales beneath the vast sky, a soft, enduring presence that has survived in memory, myth, and the faint traces left in mud and brick. A distant fox yips, the sound carried faintly on the wind. The city is quiet now, alive only in memory and imagination. You breathe deeply, letting the scent of dust, clay, and faint canal water fill your lungs. Ur remains a testament to human ingenuity, devotion, and resilience. A city that thrived and persisted not just through monumental ambition, but through the delicate rhythms of ordinary life. The sun rises softly, spilling a pale light across the plain as you leave Ur behind, heading northeast toward the remnants of Erbel, or ancient Arbela, as some scholars still argue it was called in early Mesopotamian records. Unlike Ur's grandiose ziggurats or Uruk's sprawling streets, Arbela is quieter, more modest, yet its significance resonates in the subtle echoes of history. You trudge along the dusty path, feeling the warmth of the sun creep over your shoulders, carrying the faint scent of baked clay and dry grass. Arbela was not as mighty as Uruk or Ur in size, but it played a pivotal role as a center of trade, religion, and strategic influence. The city sat at a crossroads, linking northern Mesopotamia to the southern cities via overland routes and smaller rivers. You imagine caravans trundling along the dusty tracks, laden with dates, textiles, and perhaps even copper from distant mountains. Merchants haggling over prices, scribes recording transactions on clay tablets, and guards keeping a watchful eye. The city was alive in a quiet, functional way, organized less for spectacle than survival and efficiency. Arbela became famous in later history as the site of significant battles,
including the legendary clash between Alexander the Great and Darius III's Persian forces, though that event occurs long after the Sumerian era you're traversing. Still, the city's enduring presence underscores the continuity of settlement in Mesopotamia. From humble beginnings as a trading post or small religious site, it maintains strategic and symbolic importance for millennia.
You wander through the ruins, noting the faint outlines of streets and low walls. The city was built from mud brick, like so many others, and much of it has eroded into gentle mounds scattered across the plain. Archaeologists have uncovered traces of residential areas, temples, and small public spaces, revealing a community attuned to practical needs and ceremonial observances alike. You crouch beside a small courtyard, tracing the edge of a brick that feels warm beneath your hand. Someone pressed it, shaped it, centuries ago, embedding a fragment of themselves into this place. Historians still argue about Arbella's early role in the Sumerian and Akkadian periods. Some suggest it functioned primarily as a religious hub, home to shrines and temples dedicated to local deities. Others emphasize its strategic location, asserting that trade and military oversight were just as important. Perhaps it was both, a place where sacred and practical concerns intertwine seamlessly, shaping life in ways subtle yet enduring. You follow a narrow alley that winds toward a central mound. This may have been the site of the main temple, now reduced to eroded clay and scattered stones. The air is faintly sweet with the remnants of incense and herbs, though only your imagination can fill in the smells fully. Priests would have tended altars here, performing rituals to ensure protection, fertility, and the favor of the gods. You imagine the soft flicker of oil lamps, the low hum of chants, and the careful placement of offerings in the temple's shadowed corners. One quirky detail, excavations in Arbella revealed tiny clay figurines depicting animals and humans, sometimes abstract in design. Scholars speculate they were offerings, charms, or perhaps toys, hinting at an everyday spirituality interwoven with mundane life. You pick up a small shard shaped like an animal, tracing its rough edges with your fingers. Someone, long gone, held this too, whispering a hope, a prayer, or maybe a joke to the gods. The residential area shows signs of thoughtful planning. Courtyards open to the sky, streets narrow but navigable, small workshops tucked behind homes. You imagine families gathering for meals, children playing, artisans hammering bronze or weaving reeds. The city hums silently beneath your imagination, a rhythm of ordinary life supporting the city's spiritual and economic functions. Without these daily routines, Arbella would have been no more than a mound of clay and dust. The canal systems, though largely silted now, once brought life to fields and orchards. Farmers guided water carefully, ensuring barley, wheat, and vegetables thrived. You crouch beside a faint channel, letting your fingers skim the dry surface, imagining how water shaped life, economy, and ritual in equal measure. Control of water meant survival, and survival meant the city endured, quietly, persistently, resilient against the encroaching desert. Historians still debate how Arbella interacted with neighboring cities. Did it serve as a satellite trading post, a religious outpost, or an autonomous hub of power? Evidence is fragmentary, leaving room for interpretation. You like that about ruins. The ambiguity invites imagination, letting you wander not just in space, but through possibility, tracing the faint pulse of human intent across millennia. As the afternoon heat rises, you find a shaded spot beneath the remains of a low wall. The sun glows warm on your back, and you watch the horizon, where the faint mounds of other ancient cities shimmer in the distance. Traders, priests, families, they all move through this landscape, a network of lives that left subtle impressions in the soil, clay, and memory. Even in ruin, Arbella tells its story of connection, continuity, and the quiet persistence of human settlement. You notice a small, dry courtyard littered with fragments of pottery and clay tablets. The markings are faded, yet you can imagine the scribes who once pressed symbols into soft clay, recording sales, tributes, or perhaps prayers. Ordinary bureaucracy, you think, has always been the backbone of civilization. Without it, temples cannot function, trade cannot flow, and cities cannot survive. Even here, in a quieter city, this rhythm hums beneath the surface.
The sun begins to sink, and the plain softens to gold and lavender hues. Shadows lengthen across the ruined walls, giving the city a gentle, almost serene appearance. You stand atop a small mound, feeling the heat of baked clay beneath your feet and the whisper of wind in your hair. You imagine Arbela alive, children darting through alleys, merchants calling out from stalls, priests moving in measured ritual, farmers tending crops. The city pulses with the quiet cadence of life, resilient, enduring, and somehow comforting.
Night descends gradually, the sky deepening to indigo. Stars emerge, scattered like tiny lanterns above the ruins. The same constellations that guided travelers and priests across Mesopotamia. You lie back on the warm clay, letting the sounds of wind, distant birds, and insects wash over you. Arbela, though modest in size, has left its mark. Its story is one of quiet persistence, a testament to the daily acts, prayers, and labors that sustain human settlement across generations. Somewhere nearby, a fox calls, the sound echoing across the empty plain. You breathe deeply, letting the cool night air settle in your lungs. Arbela survives not in grandeur or fame, but in continuity, in the rhythm of life, the network of canals, the careful administration of daily needs, and the enduring traces left in clay and dust. Tonight, you rest among its ruins, feeling the subtle pulse of a city that quietly shaped the world around it. The sun is gentle on your back as you rise from Arbela and follow the faint trail that winds northeast toward the ruins of Mari, perched along the western edge of Mesopotamia's rivers. The landscape here changes subtly, the soil darker, richer, nourished by the broad sweep of the Euphrates. In antiquity, this river was Mari's lifeblood, threading through the city and its fields, shaping life, trade, and ritual. You trudge along the dusty embankment, the faint breeze carrying the scent of clay and distant reeds, imagining the city as it once was, bustling, strategic, and alive with human ambition. Mari is smaller than Uruk or but no less remarkable. Its grandeur was not in size alone, but in its sophisticated administration and strategic location. Positioned along trade routes linking the east and west, it became a nexus for merchants, diplomats, and kings. You follow the contours of low mounds that mark the city's perimeter, tracing the outlines of streets and palaces that house scribes, rulers, and citizens alike. The air feels heavy with memory, and you sense that this city, though long abandoned, thrums quietly beneath your feet. Mari's most famous feature is its royal palace, which housed extensive archives of clay tablets. These records document administration, trade, diplomacy, and law, offering a rare window into the workings of an ancient city. You kneel near the crumbled wall of a structure, imagining scribes pressing wedge-shaped marks into soft clay, meticulously recording transactions, grain allocations, or messages from distant rulers. Their work may have seemed mundane, yet it has preserved Mari's essence for millennia. Walking through the ruins, you notice the careful layout. Residential areas, temples, marketplaces, and administrative buildings were organized with purpose, reflecting the city's sophisticated planning. Streets curve gently, connecting homes with public spaces, while small courtyards provide light and ventilation. You imagine children running barefoot, dogs darting between walls, women carrying water from nearby canals, and artisans shaping clay, metal, and reed. Life here was both orderly and dynamic, a rhythm of work, devotion, and community. Historians still argue about Mari's role in regional politics. Some claim it was a major military and economic hub, exerting influence over surrounding territories. Others emphasize its diplomatic significance, highlighting the extensive correspondence with cities such as Ebla, and Babylon. Perhaps it was both, a city where commerce, politics, and ritual intertwined seamlessly, creating a subtle yet enduring form of power.
You wander toward what was once the central temple district, imagining priests moving through shadowed halls, carrying offerings, reciting prayers, and performing rituals to secure the favor of the gods. The temple foundations are eroded, yet faint impressions of ceremonial spaces remain. You can almost smell the incense that once lingered in these spaces, mingling with the aroma of baked clay and fresh grain, the sensory overlap of devotion and daily life. One quirky detail, archaeologists uncovered small gaming pieces in Mari, suggesting that leisure and entertainment were integral to city life. Children and adults alike may have gathered in courtyards, playing simple strategy games with clay tokens, honing their wits while enjoying a moment of respite. You smile at the thought, a reminder that even in ancient cities devoted to gods and kings, human play persisted, softening the edges of formality. The palace mound rises in the distance, partially excavated, yet commanding attention. Its walls, though collapsed, hinted grandeur. Elaborate rooms, reception halls, and archives brimming with administrative records. You imagine the king's court, advisors moving with quiet purpose, scribes copying correspondence, and servants carrying provisions. Life here balanced ceremony and practicality, a dance of power that relied as much on record-keeping and organization as on brute force or spectacle. You trace the path of the Euphrates as it winds through the ruins. Its waters once nourished orchards, fields, and gardens, sustaining both the city's people and their livestock. Farmers guided the flow carefully, ensuring that irrigation reached each field without flooding others. Water was life, order, and control all at once. Kneeling beside a shallow, sunlit channel, you dip your fingers in, feeling the faint coolness against the heat of the plain. Civilization, you realize, has always been about managing resources as much as building walls or temples. Historians still debate the nature of Mari's decline. Some suggest it fell to military conquest. Others propose environmental challenges or shifts in trade routes gradually eroded its significance. Whatever the cause, the city's memory endures in its tablets, ruins, and the traces of ordinary life left behind. The pottery fragments, the foundations of homes, the faint remains of streets winding through the clay. You feel that memory as you walk, a quiet pulse beneath the heat and dust. The sun dips toward late afternoon, casting long shadows across the ruins. You climb a low mound to observe the city from above. The palace, residential areas, and canal traces spread out before you, a silent mosaic of human ingenuity. You imagine the city alive, merchants negotiating quietly, children laughing, priests chanting softly in temple halls, scribes carefully pressing clay tablets. Every movement, however ordinary, contributed to the rhythm and endurance of Mari's civilization. A soft wind stirs the air, carrying the scent of dry clay and faint vegetation. You pause, letting the quiet settle, and reflect on how Mari, like other Mesopotamian cities, balanced ambition and ordinariness, religion and bureaucracy, trade and domestic life. The city's legacy is subtle but profound, a testament to the endurance of human endeavor, the quiet pulse of civilization that persists even in ruin. As night falls, the stars appear overhead, scattered across the deep indigo sky. You lie back on warm clay, listening to the faint murmur of wind through the plain. The city exhales softly beneath you, a quiet rhythm of past lives and enduring legacy. In Mari, as in other ancient cities, civilization survives not only in monuments and artifacts,
but in the ordinary, persistent patterns of human existence. The laughter, the prayers, the labor, and the fleeting joys of daily life. The sun rises softly over the horizon as you leave Mari behind, following the faint curve of an old trade route that leads you southeast toward the ruins of Lagash, a city whose name once resonated across southern Mesopotamia. The landscape changes subtly. The plain stretches wide and flat, flecked with the pale green of sparse reeds and the occasional cluster of clay mounds marking long abandoned dwellings. You trudge along the dust-laden path, feeling the heat of the sun climb gradually, and imagine Lagash as it once was, a bustling center of commerce, religion, and civic life. Lagash was not the largest city of Sumer, yet its influence was profound, particularly in administration, law, and art. The city boasted complex irrigation systems, well-organized streets, and monumental temples, all evidence of a society attentive to both practicality and devotion. You walk through the low mounds marking its perimeter, envisioning a city alive with farmers, merchants, artisans, and priests. Each person contributed to a rhythm of life that sustained the city across centuries, quietly persistent and remarkably ordered. Lagash is famous for its administrative innovations, including early examples of recorded law and governance. Kings such as Eonatum codified regulations, oversaw canals, and directed trade, blending political authority with practical management. You crouch beside a fragment of inscribed clay, tracing the tiny wedge-shaped symbols. Someone, long ago, pressed them carefully, recording a grain allocation or a tax levy. It was mundane work then, yet today it speaks volumes about order, civilization, and human intent. You wander into the temple district, where the remains of several shrines still hint at grandeur. Priests once moved through these spaces, conducting rituals to appease gods like Ningirsu, the city's patron deity. The foundations are simple now, yet you can imagine the ceremonies. Incense purling through open courtyards, offerings of grain and oil placed carefully on altars, and soft chanting filling the air. Even in ruin, the energy of devotion lingers faintly, almost tactile against the warm clay beneath your fingers. Historians still argue about Lagash's early prominence relative to neighboring city-states. Some suggest it wielded extensive political and military influence, while others emphasize its economic and religious contributions. Perhaps its enduring legacy lies not in dominance, but in the careful orchestration of civic life, an example of how human societies balance governance, faith, and daily labor. As you move toward the residential quarters, the streets open gently, lined with low mud brick homes arranged around central courtyards. Women carry water from nearby canals, children play barefoot between walls, and artisans hammer bronze or mold clay, the ordinary rhythm of life humming quietly through the city. You notice fragments of pottery and small figurines scattered across the ground. Clay goats, miniature vessels, and abstract carvings that hint at everyday rituals, play, or perhaps charms for protection. Each fragment carries the faint echo of hands long gone, reminders that civilization depends on countless small acts. Lagash produced intricate votive statues, small figurines left in temples as offerings. Some depict humble citizens, perhaps a child, a farmer, or a minor official, kneeling in devotion. You imagine one such statue placed carefully on a shrine, a silent testament to faith, hope, or the desire for divine favor. It's both ordinary and extraordinary, a small gesture preserving human presence across millennia. You wander to the marketplace area, where outlines of stalls and streets remain visible. Merchants would have arranged baskets of grain, clay jars, and woven mats, while farmers brought their goods from surrounding villages. The soft hum of barter, negotiation, and daily life would have filled the air. You can almost hear the faint clatter of pottery, the shuffle of feet, the occasional scolding voice, all merging into a quiet, persistent pulse that defines urban life. Historians still debate the exact social hierarchy of Lagash. Evidence suggests a stratified society: kings overseeing military and civil duties, priests managing temples and rituals, artisans and merchants ensuring economic vitality, and farmers sustaining the city with crops and livestock. The interplay of these roles created a balance, a rhythm that allowed the city to thrive for centuries. You pause to imagine the everyday coordination required to keep canals flowing, temples stocked, and markets supplied. A delicate equilibrium maintained through diligence and routine. You follow a faint canal on the outskirts of the city, imagining how water once sustained both agriculture and daily life. Farmers would have carefully guided irrigation, ensuring each field received the right amount of water. Livestock drank, crops flourished, and the city endured. Water management was not merely practical, but symbolic. It represented control over life, stability, and prosperity. Kneeling beside the faint trace of the channel, you dip your fingers into the dry bed, imagining the hands that once guided it with care. As the sun tilts toward late afternoon, Lagash glows in warm, soft light. Shadows stretch across the mounds, giving the city a gentle serenity. You climb a small elevation to look down on the layout. The temple district, residential areas, marketplaces, and canals all form a quiet mosaic of human ingenuity. You imagine the city alive: priests performing rituals, children running through streets, artisans shaping clay and bronze, farmers tending fields, merchants negotiating. Each action contributes to a rhythm, persistent and enduring, shaping Lagash's legacy even in silence. Night falls slowly, stars emerging in the deep indigo sky. The city exhales softly beneath the blanket of darkness, the faint hum of wind, distant birds, and insects filling the air. Lagash survives not in monumental fame alone, but in the quiet persistence of human endeavor. The prayers, the labor, the negotiations, the fleeting joys of everyday life. You lean back on the warm clay, letting the sense of continuity settle over you, and feel a profound calm in the enduring pulse of this once great city. The morning sun rises slowly as you leave Lagash behind, following the faint traces of ancient paths that lead northwest toward the ruins of Shuruppak, a city whose quiet remnants tell stories of survival, ingenuity, and everyday life along the banks of the Euphrates. The plain here is flat and unbroken, pale under the gentle light, interrupted only by scattered mounds of clay and reed that mark centuries-old dwellings and workshops. You trudge forward, feeling the warmth of the sun on your shoulders and imagining Shuruppak as it once was, a modest yet vital city sustaining trade, worship, and human rhythm in equal measure. Shuruppak is smaller than the likes of Uruk or Ur, yet it carries immense historical significance. It is often remembered as the home of early Sumerian scribes, one of the first cities where writing was used systematically to record both commerce and daily life. You wander through the faint outlines of streets, low walls, and courtyards, imagining farmers, merchants, and artisans bustling along these narrow pathways. Life here seems quieter, less monumental, yet rich in subtle activity, the heartbeat of ordinary civilization. Shuruppak is known for its association with the Sumerian king list and early flood stories, which later influenced other Mesopotamian myths. You imagine scribes carefully inscribing clay tablets with cuneiform symbols, chronicling kings, events, and offerings. The act may have seemed routine at the time, yet it ensured the city's story would endure for millennia, whispered across clay and time. You walk past the remains of a modest temple, where faint foundations hint at shrines devoted to local deities. Priests would have moved quietly through its corridors, offering grain, oil, and incense to gods whose names and powers may now be forgotten. The foundations are simple, but you can almost hear the hum of chanting, the flicker of lamps, and the soft scrape of feet across worn stone or clay. Even here, devotion intertwined with daily life, a quiet pulse sustaining both city and spirit. Historians still debate Shuruppak's prominence relative to other Sumerian cities. Some evidence suggests it was a minor political center, but a hub for scribes and learning, emphasizing administration and culture over military might. Others highlight its strategic position along trade routes and the Euphrates, suggesting a more active role in regional commerce. Perhaps it was both. A city of modest size but enduring influence, quietly shaping culture and governance. You follow a narrow street lined with low houses and small courtyards. Women carry water from nearby canals, children dart between walls, and artisans mold clay or shape reeds. The rhythm of daily life hums quietly beneath the ruins. Pottery fragments lie scattered across the streets, tiny toys hint at children at play, and shards of clay tablets reveal the careful record-keeping that structured commerce, tribute, and offerings. Civilization here is quiet, built not on spectacle, but on persistence, labor, and community. One quirky detail, archaeologists discovered small clay tokens and miniature tools in Shuruppak, likely used for accounting or as toys. You imagine a child holding a tiny clay ox, pretending it grazes on the plain, while nearby a scribe records the city's grain reserves. The mundane and the symbolic coexist seamlessly, a reminder that even in early urban centers, life balanced utility, devotion, and play. You continue toward the canal district, imagining water flowing through carefully guided channels to fields, gardens, and orchards. Farmers would have regulated the flow, ensuring crops thrived without flooding the streets. Water was both sustenance and control, shaping the rhythm of life in Shuruppak as much as religion or governance. You kneel beside a narrow channel, running your fingers through the dry silt, imagining the hands that guided the flow centuries ago. Historians still argue about the exact layout and social structure of Shuruppak. Some suggest a relatively egalitarian society, with temples and scribes mediating disputes and recording transactions. Others point to evidence of hierarchical administration, indicating that kings or governors exerted control over trade, agriculture, and ritual. Whatever the case, the city thrived through coordination, routine, and careful attention to both human and environmental needs. As the afternoon stretches, you reach the central mound, once home to the city's palace or administrative complex. The foundations rise faintly, broken but still imposing in scale. You imagine rulers overseeing the flow of goods, scribes diligently recording transactions, and priests moving quietly between shrines. Daily life, whether monumental or ordinary, hums steadily through the city, shaping its endurance across centuries. A soft wind carries the faint scent of baked clay and distant reeds. You pause atop a mound, surveying the city spread out below. The canal lines, residential courtyards, and temple foundations form a subtle mosaic, a quiet testament to human ingenuity and organization. You imagine Shuruppak alive, children laughing, merchants calling softly, priests chanting in low tones, farmers tending fields. Each small action contributes to the city's pulse, a rhythm of endurance that transcends time. As evening descends, stars emerge across the deepening sky, scattered like tiny lanterns. You lie back on the warm clay, letting the stillness settle around you. Shuruppak survives not through grandeur or fame alone, but through the persistent rhythm of life. Prayers, labor, and play, the ordinary and essential acts that sustain civilization. Tonight, you rest among its ruins, feeling the quiet pulse of a city that endured, subtly, quietly, yet profoundly, through millennia. The sun rises gently over the Mesopotamian plain as you leave Shuruppak behind, following the faint, winding traces of ancient roads that guide you toward the ruins of Eridu, often considered the very first city in Sumerian memory. The air is warm but not oppressive, carrying the soft scent of clay, dust, and distant reeds. You trudge slowly, the plain stretching endlessly in every direction, dotted with low mounds and faint impressions of canals, all whispering stories of human endeavor that stretch back thousands of years. Eridu is small compared to the grandeur of or Uruk, but its significance is immense. The city's ziggurat, dedicated to Enki, the god of water, wisdom, and creation, rises faintly from the mound, its base eroded but unmistakable. You imagine priests moving through shadowed corridors, offering incense and libations, their chants soft but steady, echoing across courtyards and streets. Eridu embodies the intimate, persistent pulse of urban life, not the monumental scale of power, but the careful interweaving of religion, governance, and daily survival. Eridu is widely considered the oldest city in Sumerian tradition, a site of early temple construction and urban planning dating back to the Ubaid period, around 5400 BCE. You trace the foundations of mud brick walls with your fingertips, imagining the laborers who shaped the city brick by brick, hand-pressed into soft clay under the sun, their work forming the very skeleton of civilization. Every handprint, every pressed symbol in the bricks is a whisper across time, a faint echo of lives lived long ago. As you explore the ruins, you notice small courtyards and streets branching from the temple mound, suggesting organized neighborhoods. Families once lived here, tending animals, cooking meals, and raising children. You picture children running barefoot across the courtyards, their laughter mingling with the occasional bray of a donkey or the soft clatter of pottery. Women carry water from canals, men guide the irrigation, and artisans shape clay and reeds. The city hums with everyday life, ordinary acts that sustain extraordinary continuity. Historians still argue about the city's prominence relative to later Mesopotamian centers. Some evidence suggests Eridu served primarily as a religious hub, while others highlight its role in early trade and administration. Perhaps its significance lay in its endurance, a template for urban development, a rhythm of life that informed subsequent cities. Its ziggurat, canals, and neighborhoods reveal a balance between devotion, governance, and ordinary domestic activity, a model replicated across Sumer for millennia. You wander toward the canal system, its faint traces still visible, imagining the careful guidance of water to fields of barley, wheat, and reeds. Farmers must have worked in harmony with the rhythm of the river, adjusting flow to protect crops, nourish animals, and support the city's survival. Water management is as much symbolic as practical here, representing control over life itself. You kneel beside a dry channel, letting your fingers trace the faint path of centuries-old silt, feeling a direct, tactile connection to those who shaped the land. One quirky detail, archaeologists uncovered small figurines of humans and animals in Eridu's temple precincts, possibly offerings or charms. You imagine a priest placing a tiny clay fish on an altar, whispering a hope for fertile waters or protection for the harvest. These small, intimate gestures reflect a culture attuned to both the spiritual and the practical, blending devotion with everyday concerns in ways that feel surprisingly familiar. The residential quarter is quiet now, but you can still trace its careful layout. Homes arranged around courtyards, workshops tucked behind, streets connecting families to markets and temples. You imagine the soft hum of life, cooking fires, children's laughter, artisans shaping clay or reeds, merchants preparing goods. Even in a smaller city like Eridu, life is a network of interaction, a rhythm sustained through labor, devotion, and ordinary human persistence. Historians still debate the relationship between Eridu and later urban centers. Did Eridu exert political influence, or was its impact primarily cultural and religious? Evidence is fragmentary, leaving room for interpretation. Perhaps its greatest legacy lies not in dominance, but in continuity. The way its structures, rituals, and urban organization informed subsequent Sumerian cities, providing a quiet model for civilization itself. As the afternoon light softens, you climb the mound near the ziggurat and survey the city spread below. The canals, temple foundations, streets, and courtyards form a subtle mosaic, a quiet testament to ingenuity and human persistence. You imagine Eridu alive, priests chanting softly, children playing, merchants negotiating, farmers tending fields. Every small act contributes to the city's pulse, a rhythm that persists even in ruin. The sun dips low, painting the ruins in gentle gold and shadow. A soft breeze carries the faint scent of clay and distant reeds. You lie back on the warm mound, letting the quiet settle over you. Eridu survives not in grandeur alone, but in the persistent rhythms of life. The prayers, the labor, the play, and the ordinary acts that sustain civilization. The stars emerge slowly overhead, scattered like tiny lanterns across the indigo sky. You feel the subtle pulse of the city beneath you, the quiet endurance of human endeavor spanning millennia. Eridu whispers its story softly, not in monuments or fame, but in continuity, in the persistence of ordinary life that shaped the very idea of civilization. As the night deepens, the landscape fades gently into shadow. You take a slow breath, letting the cool air wash over you. Every city you visited, Kish, Uruk, Arbela, Mari, Lagash, Shuruppak, and now Eridu, leaves its imprint, a layered memory of human effort, devotion, and resilience. Civilization, you realize, is built not only on monumental achievements, but on the quiet persistence of ordinary life, the rhythm of daily acts repeated across generations. The plain is calm, the stars steady above. You feel the soothing cadence of human history, a gentle reassurance that the echoes of life endure long after walls crumble and canals dry. Eridu, like the other cities, is a reminder that human civilization is both fragile and remarkably persistent, a quiet pulse that threads through time. Slowly, your heartbeat matches the rhythm of the plain, the cities, and the faintly whispering wind. You allow yourself to rest, eyes closing softly, the soft brush of air like a lullaby. All is calm, all is quiet, and the legacy of Mesopotamia hums gently beneath you, a whisper of endurance, labor, and everyday devotion. The soft night settles fully, and the cities, once vibrant with human life, now breathe quietly in memory. You are a silent witness to this endurance, feeling the pulse of thousands of years in the warmth of clay beneath you and the stars above. The night wraps around the plain like a soft blanket, and you lie back, letting your body sink into the gentle warmth of the sun-baked clay. The cities you've wandered through, the bustling streets of Uruk, the towering ziggurat of the quiet courtyards of Shuruppak, the enduring pulse of Eridu, fade softly into memory, their stories blending into a single, slow rhythm that lulls the mind. Imagine the wind parrying whispers of prayers, laughter, and footsteps, mixing with the soft, timeless hum of the plain. Your thoughts drift over canals, courtyards, and temple mounds, the careful flow of water, the soft clatter of clay, the laughter of children, and the quiet work of artisans. The monuments seem less imposing now, and the daily lives of ordinary people stand gently at the center, the hands shaping clay, the women carrying water, the scribes recording life in wedge-shaped marks. Civilization, you realize, survives as much in routine, care, and small devotion as in grand walls or towering temples. Stars glimmer above, steady and patient, as they have since the first settlements rose along these rivers. The night is quiet, the air soft and steady. In your mind, the cities breathe slowly, their pulse unhurried, stretching across millennia, assuring you that human endeavor endures, even through silence. You feel yourself merging with that rhythm, calm, secure, and slowly drifting toward rest. The stories of Mesopotamia fade gently, leaving only the soft reassurance of continuity and quiet persistence. The plain is still, the cities sleep, and now you can too. End of script. Sweet dreams.